All right, Shabbos, say good morning, Afrelich and Parama, good night of Shabbos. Such a schos baruch Shem to be able to learn the daf together on this holy and incredible day. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Share to thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for Tafshin Pei Hey, the Tilsim Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shurim and drushos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, Terry and Steve Zinn, in loving memory of Terry's father, Dr. Harry Khan, Tzvi Hirsch, Ben Yosef HaKohen, the Ziv, Levin, and Berman families, in memory of William Ziv, Zev Shmuel, Ben Yisrael, Zichron Livracha, and our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's grandfather, Zechariah Ben Zechariah, Zichron Livracha. We obtain the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all those who need refuah shavan together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, Kodesh Baruch Hu Shalem Yirtz Hashem, bring home all of our hostages, allow our holy soldiers to be successful. B'chol Maaseh Yedehem, we should just be Zochem Yirtz Hashem Tenisim V'niflos for all of Klal Yisrael. But with that, let us begin. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, and less time than usual. So let's maximize it. Today's daf is Pei 87. We are picking up on Pei Vav on Pei's 86b, and let's just pick up again with Amar Abaye. So if you see where Tosfos Amar is, Amar Rav Yosef on 86b, you just move your finger to the left, and about 4 lines up from there. We actually read this yesterday, but let's just read it again now. Amar Abaye, Hakom Oldim ben Sora Mora, Hakom Oldim ben Sora Mora, Umachlokas ben Sora Mora. Okay, so remember we saw this enigmatic statement yesterday. So Abaye says like this: everyone agrees that Ben Sora Mora, that the witnesses by Ben Sora Mora are chayiv. Everyone agrees that the witnesses by Ben Sora Mora are pater. And everyone agrees that there's a machlokas. So what's the case? So Mora says, Hakom Oldim ben Sora Mora, Beidim Harishonim Shein Neragim Mitoch Shecholim Lomar Lahal Kosobanu. Everyone agrees that regarding the first set of witnesses who come to testify about Ben Sora Mora, if they are made into Eidim Zomamin, that they cannot be executed. They cannot be executed. Why? Because they can always claim that their entire intention was only to go ahead and visit Malchus upon the kid. Ha'akamod ben Sora Mora, be'edim achronim sheneragim mitoch she'edim harishonim yichol lomar la'kol samanu v'hani kulu davar ka'avdilei. And everyone agrees when it comes to the second set of witnesses who testify about Ben Sora Mora, that if they are made into Eidim Zomamin, that they can be killed. Why? Because essentially the entire death sentence of the Ben Sora Mora hinges on their testimony, because the first set of witnesses could simply say, we only came in order to make him chayiv malchus, and therefore the second set are clearly the ones who are responsible for the death penalty. Or machlokes ben Sora Mora, whereas the machlokes case ben Sora Mora is actually quite interesting. Shnayim omrim befanenu ganav, u'shnayim omrim befanenu achal. Interesting case over. You have 2 witnesses who testify, we saw the kid, right? We saw the Ben Sora Mora steal the money from his father. And 2 more say, we saw him go ahead and eat the meat and wine. So whereas normally, again, you're having 1 set of witnesses testify about both events, here you have 2 separate witnesses testifying about 2 separate events. What's the nature of that combined testimony? That's the machlokes. Ravasi says this also. This is interesting. So back to kidnapping, right? Reuven kidnaps Shimon. So now what happens? Witnesses come along and say, we saw Reuven kidnap and sell Shimon. So what happens? Now those very same witnesses are made into Eidim Zomamin. So the Gemara says, they are not killed. Eidim Zomamin are not killed. Why not? Ein neragin. Mitoch sheichol lomar avdi macharti. Because Reuven could always turn around and say, yeah, it's true. I sold Shimon. Do you know why I sold Shimon? He's my Eved. He's my slave. So because he's my slave, I'm allowed to sell him. So because ultimately, again, the defendant could technically exempt himself with a claim, therefore, halacha l'maisa, Eidim Zomamin would not be able to be executed over this. Amar Rav Yosef, Kiman az lahashmaita dravasi, ki Rabbi Akiva, whose opinion is this? Like this is like Rabbi Akiva. Why? The Amar davar v'lo chatzi davar. Because Rabbi Akiva is the one who says that halacha l'maisa, in order to be liable, halacha l'maisa, you have to be testifying about an entire inyan. Remember again, this goes back to the beginning of yesterday's daf. Whole davar and not chatzi davar. Amrli Abaye, the ikar Rabbanon neheragin. So according to Rabbanon, apparently again, the witnesses could be killed. But 1 second, what about what we just said? Hamitoch kamar. We just said a moment ago that halacha l'maisa, the defendant could exempt himself. How could he exempt himself? Because he could go ahead and say, that, yes, I sold Shimon, but Shimon is my Eved. So this is interesting. What's the case over here? The case over here was where the witnesses claim that we saw Reuven sell Shimon. What's missing? What's missing? Witnesses that say that Reuven kidnapped Shimon. So you have Eidei Mechira, but you don't have Eidei Geneva. Well, one second. If you have, I understand, if you only have witnesses that Reuven went ahead and sold Shimon, but no witnesses that Reuven kidnapped Shimon, so there's no case over here. What are we talking about? No, the idea over here is at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, the witnesses to the kidnapping came later on. Okay, but if they came later on, they came later on. In other words, again, if at the time that the witnesses are testifying that Reuven sold Shimon, there's not yet accepted testimony that Reuven kidnapped Shimon, then how could there be liability for the Eidei Mechira if we have not yet accepted testimony about the kidnapping itself? Lo tzricha de kamaramzi remuzi. So this is interesting. What's happening over here? The witnesses are signaling to each other. In other words, interestingly enough, in this case over here, the witnesses that testify that Reuven sold Shimon are the ones who appear first in Beis Din. But as they're testifying, there's another set of witnesses that are there, and they're there to testify that Reuven kidnapped Shimon. And like they're motioning to each other, not like in a bad way, not like in a collusion way. They just happen to be motioning to each other, like indicating, oh, you know what, we'll talk after you. So you might have thought, Ma'odatema, Remiza Milsahi, you might have thought the fact that the witnesses are already communicating, halacha l'maisa, this should almost be like we have testimony about the kidnapping itself, to which the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, Remiza Lav Klumhu. That ultimately, again, the signaling between witnesses is halachically insignificant. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, if you have witnesses who come along and say, we saw Reuven sell Shimon, and those witnesses are made into Eidim Zumumin, they can't be executed. Why? Because there's been no formal testimony that Reuven kidnapped Shimon. Okay, good. We'll say Mishnah, moving along. Zokin Mamre. All right, so this is very interesting. So remember, we've spoken about this, we've referenced this before. Zokin Mamre, literally translated, is the rebellious sage. Essentially, in a nutshell, the rebellious sage is a member of the Sanhedrin, as we'll discuss in just a moment, who refuses to yield to the majority and remains set in his personal opinion. Again, he's put to death. We'll see the circumstances of that right now. Says the Mishnah, Zakin Mamre al pi Beis Din. A Zakin Mamre only becomes a Zakin Mamre based on Beis Din. Shenemar, ki pali mimcha davar lemishpat. So now we're going to explain the process for Zakin Mamre. Shlosha batei dinin hayu. Sham, right? There are three different batei din situated in Yerushalayim. Listen to this. Echad yoshev al pesach harabayis. One basin was situated at the entrance of Harabayis. Ve'echad yoshev al pesach hazara. One was situated at the entrance of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Ve'echad yoshev b'lishkas hagazis. And one was situated in the chamber of hewn stone. I will say, what we call the Sanhedrin, like the High Court, that was the last one. That's number 3, situated in Lishkas Hagazis. So listen to this. So what happens? So let me give you the backstory. The backstory is, and we're going to see this in the Gemara, there's a dispute in a local Beis Din. Right? There's everyone is on one side, the Zakin Mamre is on the other side. They can't seem to reach resolution on this. So now they take their case up to Yerushalayim. First step is they go to this Beis Din, ultimately again at the entrance of the Harabayis. They come there. And the Zakin, right? We'll call it the sage in the minority. The sage of the minority, he comes along and he presents his case in front of the Beis Din. He says, listen, Chevra, this is my position. This is the position of my friends. Ultimately, this is how I learned the situation. This is how my friends learned it. So, and again, the Zakin essentially says to the Beis Din, Chevra, have you heard anything regarding this case? Have you heard anything regarding this? Okay, but I just want to point out a tremendous Mussar Haskell on this. If you notice, now remember again, he's not yet a Zakin Mamre. Right now, he's just a guy. He's just a dissenting judge. We'll see when he becomes a Zakin Mamre. Now let's say what's beautiful about this. If you notice how the Zakin Mamre talks, he goes to the Beis Din, and what does he say? This is my position, and this is my friend's position. Often in life, we are able to articulate our own position. but a lot of difficulty certainly hearing and even more so articulating the positions of others. It's a maila. It's a maila, not only to be able to celebrate, but really like to take the time to actually understand someone else's opinion. I may disagree with it at the end, but at least it's, what's the word? Like informed disagreement, as opposed to what happens all too often in life is we just kind of summarily or quickly or just superficially disagree with things that just don't sound right to us without really trying to understand what the other person is trying to say. So there's a lot of godless in this, that the Zakin Mamre is able to fully articulate the position of the other. So he goes on, fine. So good. So what happens if the first Beis Din, the Beis Din at the Harabayis, they don't have anything to add to this conversation? So what happens? They go to the next Beis Din. This Beis Din is situated at the entranceway of the Azar, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Once again, the Zakin says, this is what I say, this is what my friends say. So okay, so, and once again, the Zakin says, listen, Chevra, Beis Din at the entrance of the Azara, do you guys have anything to add? Right? Anything to add in this? If they do, fantastic. Ve'im lav, elu ve'elu ba'in lebeis din hagadash v'lishkas hagazis. And if not, then everyone. Now, it's an interesting discussion over here. Everyone sounds like even the members of the other two Batei Din, everyone's now coming along to the high court in the Lishkas HaGazis. That's where they're coming. Shemimenu yotzei Torah l'chol Yisrael. This is the Beis Din. This is the Beis Din from which Torah goes out to all of Klal Yisrael. Shnei Emar min hamakom ahu asher yivchar Hashem. Okay, so we'll say so fine. So now it turns out that now the part that the Mishnah doesn't say over here is that they get Lishkas HaGazis. The Lishkas HaGazis rules in favor of the majority and against the Zakin, against the sole opinion. Okay. So if the Zakin goes back to his town and he just continues to teach in accordance with his opinion, fine, it's not a problem. When does he become a Zakin Mamre? When does he become a Zakin Mamre? If he remains not only entrenched in his opinion, but he encourages people to act upon that opinion. In other words, if the Zakin Mamre comes back home and all he's doing over here is just simply teaching his opinion, right? He's espousing his Torah, fine, espouse your Torah. But if he comes back after this entire process and says, Chevra, this is what you have to do, clearly in defiance of the majority, that's a problem. That's when he becomes a Zakin Mamre. Chayiv, Ad she'yoru lasos, Talmid shehora lasos, pater. They're both saying, interestingly enough, all of this is a Zakin. Now, what is a Zakin? A Zakin is an ordained sage. That's going to become a Zakin Mamre. Let's say you don't have a Zakin Mamre. Let's say it's just a Talmud. What's a Talmud? Like it's Rashi says over here, Talmud shelo higia laho ra v'nechak al beis din. So this is a guy, a Talmud is someone who might be a Talmud Chacham, but he has not yet gotten to the level of hora, of what we call paskening halacha. So let's say an individual like this goes ahead and disagrees with the Beis Din and even instructs others to paskin like his particular opinion. Ultimately, pater. He's pater. Why? Because the din of Zakin Mamre is only a din of someone who has smicha and someone who has reached the level of hora, of ultimately going ahead and instructing others, paskin halacha. Nimsa chamuro kulo. So they will say, it turns out that ultimately, again, his chumrah. What's his chumrah? His chumrah is that he's not allowed to paskin halacha. But that chumrah that is not paskin halacha ultimately turns out to be a kula. What does it mean, a kula? That he's not put to death for being a Zakin Mamre. Incredible. All right, Mishnah will say Gemara. Tanabanon. Here we go. Now, so now we've just outlined the process for Zakin Mamre. So now we know exactly how this works. Now the interesting part is what kind of machloksim, right? What kind of disputes are we talking about a Zakin Mamre and between his fellow sages? So Tanabanon. Top of page 87a. So first of all, we're talking about someone who will say a mufla. Now, what is a mufla? An expert. In order to become a Zakin Mamre, you can't just be a regular guy. To be a Zakin Mamre, you have to be a recognized expert. Next, mimcha. So we'll say, I just want to point out over what's happening. The Torah is, the Gemara is analyzing the pasuk. The pasuk the Gemara is analyzing is, ki pali mimcha davar when some matter in halacha will be unclear to you, bein dam ledam, right? Between blood and blood. Bein din ledin, judgment and judgment. Nega lenega, right? One type of nega. What is it? Affliction. Good, affliction. There's another word, right? Lesion. Okay, good. Bein nega lenega, divrei rivos b'sharecha, or any arguments, disputes you may have in your gates. Bekamta v'alisa l'makom ha'sheiv chal Hashem Elokecha. Both. Now the Gemara is darshaning this entire pasuk. So what does it mean? Mimcha, ki palim mimcha davar. So mimcha b'mufla. Good. Mimcha ze yoetz. Furthermore, mimcha means someone who's able to give counsel. In other words, we'll say in order to get yourself in trouble, being a zaken mamre, you have to be holding on a certain level. So mimcha, Rashi says over, can mean. Now the Gemara is also giving examples of types of machloksim which could result in a zakin mamre scenario. So, for example, mimcha refers to intercalation of the year, right? Ibar Hashana, right? Leap year, not a leap year. So this is the kind of thing. Let's say there's a dispute about that. Next, so the Gemara says, mimcha v'cheinu omer mimcha yatsa choshev al Hashem re'acha yois b'lial davar. Next is davar zu halacha. This refers to the dispute in halacha. For example, there's a dispute between the zaken mamre and the other individual about halacha l'moshe misinai. Halacha l'moshe misinai, right? So that's what they're disputing. Good. L'mishpat zehadin. What's mishpat? This refers to din, gzera shava. They have machlokas about a particular type of gzera shava. This is a gzera shava, not a gzera shava. Bein dam l'dan. So remember again, we're just going through different examples of things that ultimately, again, could result in a zakin mamre scenario. Fine. Bein dam ledam, bein dam nida ledam leida. So, for example, there's machlokes in distinguishing between dam nida and dam leida, dam ziva, bein din ledin, bein din nefashos ledin mamanas, din makas. There's a dispute in something, again, whether it's din nefashos, capital cases, din mamanas, monetary cases, din makas, lashes, bein nega lenega. What does that mean? Bein nige adam, nige batim, nige begadim. Something concerning, again, nigoim, tsaras, of an individual, of a home, of clothing. Divrei, elu charamim va'erchen va'kdeshos. So divrei means, again, cherem vows, erech vows, hekdish vows, rivos, zuashkas, sota, va'arifas egla, v'taras mitzora. So rivos, literally arguments. This refers, again, to sota situations. Egla arufa, decapitated calf, if they find the body that someone's that's killed. And taras mitzora, b'sha'arecha, in your gates. Zu leket shichacha upeya. This refers again, leket shicha and peah, the different tithes that are left, different agricultural tithes that are left for the poor. The kamta, so we'll say, so again, what the Gemara just did over here is just darshan all the different possible areas of halacha where you could have an argument which could result in a zakin mamre scenario. Okay? The kamta, so and you will get up. Where is that? Where are you getting up from? Mi Bezdin, from the local court. Va'alis, and you will go up. Melamed, shebeis hamikdash gava me'eretz Yisrael, ve'eretz Yisrael gava mikol ha'aratzos. What does this teach us? So the fact that it's interesting. The Torah says you will get up from wherever you are and go up. Go up. The Gemara says, what do you see from going up? We see the Beis Hamikdash is the highest point in Eretz Yisrael, and ultimately, again, Eretz Yisrael is higher than all of the other lands. The fact that ultimately, again, the lashon of aliyah, of ascension, is used with the Sanhedrin, which is located in the Beis Hamikdash, and with Eretz Yisrael. Incredible. So the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze that for just a moment. Bishlam Beis Hamikdash kavam Eretz Yisrael dichsev va'alisa. So I understand why we say that the Beis Hamikdash is taller, is one of the tallest parts in Eretz Yisrael, because the lashon is va'alisa. You go up to the Beis Hamikdash. Ella, Eretz Yisrael gava mikol ha'aratzos minale. From where do I know that Eretz Yisrael is higher than the other lands? Dichsev lachin hine yomim ba'im nu'um Hashem. Lo yomer chay Hashem asher he'ela es b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Kim chay Hashem asher he'ela v'asher hevi ezera beis Yisrael me'eretz tzefona. Mikol ha'aratzos asher idachtim sham v'yashuv al ha'masam. I will say, how incredible is this? The Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk from Yirmiyahu HaNavi. And Yirmiyahu HaNavi says something beautiful. He says, the day will come. Hine yomim ba'im. The days will come where we will no longer simply refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the God who took us out of Egypt, right? And if you notice, we'll say the lashon over here is He'ela es b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem took us. It's not just simply out. What does He'ela mean? Hashem took us up. Hashem took us up. So we won't only refer to the God as God who took us up from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael, but rather what? We refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the one who brought the children of Israel from all the lands, who brought us up. Hela v'asher hevi, from all the lands. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that whenever there's a reference to taking us to Eretz Yisrael, what's the lashon? What's the lashon? Aliyah. Always lashon. We'll say, I just want to point out, how overwhelmingly amazing is it that we're quoting this pasuk of Geula on Purim? On Purim. It's not even the best Purim reference. Just hold on to your seats. Wait till you see what's going to come. Wait, right? Let's say, but just amazing. A pasuk about Geula, we're literally talking about the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to take us out of all of the lands of our dispersion and is going to bring us up. Going to bring us up. You know, as great as Purim is, and as beautiful as Purim is Nisim D'Iskasya. It's covered miracles. It's hidden miracles, right? It's miracles cloaked in nature. And what Purim awakens in us, as much as we celebrate this beautiful, beautiful nace, and to have incredible Hakar Sof Kadosh Baruch Hu, it awakens in us the desire for something more. I don't want hidden miracles. I don't want Nisim D'Iskasya. We want Nisim D'Isgalya. We want revealed miracles. And here, as we're yearning for revealed miracles, what does the Gemara give us? The Gemara gives us such a beautiful matana. Pasuk in Yirmiyah and Navi. Yirmiyah reminds us the revealed miracles are going to come. They're going to come. And when they come, you're going to Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to take us up. He's going to take us out. Because every reference to Eretz Yisrael is only one direction. And that's always going up. Incredible. Tana Abanon. Zakin Mamre. Eno Chayiv Ela Adavar Shezdono Kares. V'shigagaso Chadas to Rabbi Meir. So this is very interesting. So now that we're going to see there's essentially a three-way machlokes about what type of legal matters could make someone into a Zakin Mamre. So Rabbi Meir holds that it's only regarding something which, if done intentionally, would be a chiyuv kares, and accidentally would be a chiyuv chatos. Rabbi Huda says, al davar she'ikara me'divrei Torah, pirush me'divrei sofrim. Rabbi Huda says, no, it's about something where the source halacha is midaraisa, but the interpretation is through the Rabbanon, and they're arguing about the interpretation. So Rabbi Shimon says, afilu diktuk echad diktukei sofrim. Rabbi Shimon says, it's pretty much anything. Even if they're arguing about like a small detail in rabbinic law, diktukei sofrim, ultimately, again, it can still become a zakin mamre. So let's analyze this. My time to Rabbi Meir. So that's Rabbi Meir's logic. So remember, Rabbi Meir said that halacha l'maisa. Rabbi Meir said that halacha l'maisa. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Meir said that halacha l'maisa, the only type of thing that can make you into a zakin mamre, ultimately is the type of thing where if you do it intentionally, it's kares, unintentionally a chatos. So the Gemara says, what's his logic? Gamar davar. He makes a gzera shava ultimately again of davar. So the Gemara says, ksiv hacha, ki pali mimcha davar lemishpat. So I'll say first of the widest lines. It says over here, that's talking about the parhelam davar minat tzibor, where the Sanhedrin paskins incorrectly and ultimately leads the people to go ahead and make a mistake. Just like over there, it's talking about something where intentional commission is kares. All right, and a shogeg is chatas. Afkan, so to by zakin mamre, davar shechayiv al zdona kares. Okay, Shemer learns that from Gzera Shaba. Fine, that's opinion one. Rabbi Huda will say this. Remember, Rabbi Huda's opinion was that only become a Zakin Mamre on something Ikaro midivrei Torah and Dikduke Sofrim, right? That the Ikar halacha is midaraisa and the details are learned out midrabanan. So where does Rabbi Huda get this from? Rabbi Huda, Pia Torah she'erucha, ad the Ikar Torah v'yorucha. It has to be something where the Torah says something, but based on the pasuk in the Torah, we don't know how to paskin. We need Chazal to teach us how to interpret it. That's the type of situation that could create Zakin Mamre. And lastly, Rabbi Shimon, Asher Yigidu Lachem in Hamakamahu, Afilu Kol Du. Rabbi Shimon says pretty much anything that comes out from a Beis Din, anything they argue about, where the Zakin Mamre remains kind of fixed in place and refuses to yield to the majority, that could create Zakin Mamre. Amli Rav Huna Bar Chinana, L'Rava. Tirgamali lahamastis. Ali b'Rabbi Meir. Supposed to get ready for this. So Rav Huna Bar Chinana said, fine. Take the Bryce, and Abba says, referring to the Bryce we spoke about on the beginning of the daf. Take the Bryce and interpret it to me according to Rabbi Meir. So I'll say, so remember again, Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that halacha l'maisa, you could only become a zakin mamre if there is a machlokis regarding something that, if done intentionally, has a chiyuv kares, and if unintentionally carries a chiyuv chatas. That's the only those. It's a limited body of halacha that. So again, like if they have a machlokes, if they have a machlokes, do you need to read the Megillah a second time, during the day? If that were to be a machlokes, that could not result in a zakin mamri scenario. Why not? Because it's a din d'Rabbanan. Rabbi says it's only if their machlokes is about something which, if done intentionally, chiyuv kares, unintentionally chiyuv chatas. So now listen to this. So if Huna Bar China said to Rabbi, interpret to me the price of Rabbi Meir. Tell me how this whole thing works with Rabbi Meir. So watch this. Here we go. Ki pale. So we'll say. So he's interpreting the same exact passage that we started the daf with today. So ki pale. If something will be so b'mufla shebezin. So first of all, everyone agrees. I want to say, in order to go ahead and become a zakin mamre, you got to be a mufla. You have to be someone who's an expert. Someone who's an expert. Okay, fine. Next, mimcha ze yoetz sheodeh la'aber shanim v'likbach chadash. Furthermore, not only an expert, but an expert sheba experts. What's an expert sheba experts? Someone who knows about the intercalation of the moon. Again, I will say, you understand what it means to know about the intercalation of the moon? First of all, none of us really know what intercalation itself actually means, right? All the more so, I like using that word, right? So all the more so, the actual process for the intercalation kite of the moon, of the year, of the month. So you're talking about the expert of the experts. Fine. Next. We'll say, what's next? Good. Yoetz, sheodeh la'aber shanim v'likbach chadashim. Fine. So kidisnan. Okay, we'll say, get ready for this. What's an example of a machlokes that could occur? Okay, you ready for this? Please. Listen to this. I'm done. I feel like we should just call it a day. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. How does this happen? 7.5 year cycle. How does it happen? And it's not like a drasha, it's not like a remez, it's not a gematria. Literally, again, a Purim case on Purim. A Purim case on Purim. So what's the it's incredible. I'll say, we always say it. Sometimes, we get up early, we deprive ourselves of sleep, we push ourselves, we're going, it's a lot of information, not a lot of time, and we wonder HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how do you feel about this? Is this the proper avoda? And then every once in a while, and not so infrequently, the Rebbe Shalom gives us just a beautiful kiss, a nachas embrace, says, my children, I love you. And thank you. Thank you for waking up early, or whenever we do the daf. Thank you for carving out the time to learn my Torah. And if you think that I'm not listening to you, and if you think that I'm not attentive to you, and if you think that out of however many blot there are in Shas, that a Purim sugya should come up in Purim. I will say one day earlier, one day later, no, punct on Purim, the Purim sugya comes up. I will say, just know. Sometimes, what does every child want to know? Deep down, every child wants to know that I give my father nachas. That's what I want to do. Spend our lives trying to give our parents nachos. So again, all the more so with the Ribbon Shalom. And then a Gemara like this comes along, and we know that Abba is so incredibly proud of us. Halavai, we should be zocheh to continue to give our father nachos. So again, the Gemara gives an example over here. What's the Purim case? For example, so for example, let's say they have a machlokes about how to go ahead and declare a leap month, a leap year. So again, the other members of the Sanhedrin said that they could go ahead and make the entire Adar into to create an Adar Sheni, right, up until Purim. So that's machlokes. Up until Purim, after Purim, the ilahai gisa kashari chametz bepesach, the ilahai gisa kashari chametz bepesach. And I will say now the ramifications, of course, of that machlokes is what? The ramifications are you going to end up eating chametz on Pesach? Right? Because remember again, depending if there's going to be a leap year, another sheni, another base, so that's going to determine when Pesach falls out. You have chametz ramifications. So here's an example of a machlokes where again the stakes are kares versus chatos. Good. The Gemara goes weiter. Davar zehalacha. Zu hilchos achadasar. Deitmar asiri. Rabbi Yochanan Amar asiri kitishi. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar asiri ka'achadasar. So we'll say. So again, if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says over here. Hilchos achadasar yom akron shal yud aleph shebei nida lenida. Shabbos says. So remember again from last cycle, from Hilchos Nida, from Mesechus Nida. So we have this concept. Rashi points out over here that there are 11 days, at least 11 days between every Nida cycle. Remember again, the way Hilchos Nida works midoraisa is a 7-11 cycle. 7 days of Nida, 11 days of Ziva. So the Gemara quotes over here again. I will say we're not going to get in depth in all of these machloksim, partly because, only because of time. They're all fascinating in of themselves. These are all I want to just frame what we're doing over here. We're just trying to show a series of machloksim. Remember again, we're trying to go according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds the only time you can become a zakin mamre is if you have a machlokis regarding something which, if done intentionally, is a chi of kares, and done unintentionally is a chi of chatos. We're just trying to now interpret the pasuk that we interpreted at the beginning of this daf and highlight a whole bunch of cases that fit into that criteria. So for example, again, what's davar? This refers to the following halacha. Zu hilchos achadasar deitmar asiri. What happens if a woman bleeds on the 10th day? Rabbi Yochanan Amar asiri kitishi. 10th is reckoned like the 9th. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar asiri ke'achadasar. So I'll say, so again, remember, they're talking about a machlokes, about what happens if there's machlokes about the status of her bleeding from the 11th day or from the 10th day going forward. Does that make her a nida? Does that make her a zava? And the resulting ramifications, which could potentially lead to a chi of kares. Rabbi Yochanan Amar asiri kitishi, ma tishi b'yishimer, af asiri b'yishimer. Fine. Rish Lakish Amar asiri ke'achadasar, ma achadasar lo b'yishimer, af asiri lo b'yishimer. So we'll say, so again, without getting into all the details right now, but fundamental machlokes about bleeding that extends from the days of the zivos, ultimately again into the days of the nidos. What's her status? And if they have a machlokes regarding that, that could lead to potential chiyuv kares. Fine. Next. Zeh. So the Gemara says Zeh hadin. So Zeh in the pasuk refers to Gzeir Shavas. The machlokes about Gzeir Shava. What does that mean? We'll say Amud Beis din bito ma'anasaso. So for example, they have machlokes regarding whether or not one's daughter from a woman who he violated. Let's say Reuven violated a woman. He violated Rachel. They had a daughter. What's the erva status of that daughter to Reuven? To Reuven, Damarava Amalei Rav Yisrael bar Abdimi Asya Heina Asya Zima. So say, so again, for example, the way remember we saw this sugi actually. So we paskin that ultimately even the daughter from a woman who still his daughter, and therefore again she is an erva to the father. She's an erva to the father. So let's say again, the Zakin Mamre paskin says no, it's only your daughter from a legal relationship, but not from a woman who he violated. So again, this would be an example of where a machlokes would be a chi of kares if done intentionally, chi of chatas unintentionally. Bein dam lidam. Bein dam nida dam leida dam ziva. So what are the cases over here? Dam nida beplukta akavya b'mehalal v'rabanan. So for example, by dam nida, the machlokes could be like the machlokes in akavya b'mehalal v'rabanan. What's the machlokes? Tisnan dam hayarak. What happens if a woman sees yellowish blood? Blood that has a yellowish color to it. So dam hayarak. Akavya b'mehalal metame. So akavya b'mehalal says ultimately again that it's tamei. The chacham metarim. And the chachamim ultimately say that it is tahar. So I'll say, so once again, what are the ramifications of this machlokes? The ramifications are a chi of kares, because relations with a woman who's in nida carries with it a penalty of kares. So again, these are examples. Dam leida. What's the dam leida case? This is very interesting. Beplukta de Rav Levi. So this is machlokes Rav and Levi. The itmar Rav Amar Mayin Echatu Hator. So says, remember again the way it works. Fascinating halachos midoraisa with childbirth. What are the halachos? The way the halachos midoraisa. Now again, we don't pass in this way today because our whole system of like dam leida, dam nida, dam ziva have kind of morphed into one framework called nida. But again, the way it works is a woman gives birth, and after she gives birth, she bleeds for a certain amount of time. The blood is tameh, and then for a certain amount of time afterwards, depending if it's a boy or a girl, the blood is tahar. There's a machlokes about the mechanics of that. Rav Amar Mayin Echatu. Rav says, really, there's one source of blood, hatar timaso, hatar tiraso. And again, at a certain point, the Torah says the blood is tameh. Another point, the Torah says ultimately again, the dam is tahar. V'Levi Amar Levi says, shnei ma'ayan osein. No, it's not true. It's two different kind of sources of blood. So the Gemara says, Nistam hatame niftach hatar, Nistam hatar niftach hatame. So literally again, if the tame source is closed off, the tar one is open. The tar source is closed off, the tame one is open. Now both say, now what does that matter? What does that matter? So this comes up in a case where ultimately a woman continuously bleeds without going ahead and stopping. So can we say that she switches over from what we call dam tame to dam tar? So once again, the ramifications over here are a chiyuv kares. All we're trying to show again are examples of cases where the Zaki and Mamre would be arguing with the rest of the Beis Din, and the stakes of the case are kares if done intentionally, chatas if done unintentionally. Dam ziva, what's the dam ziva case? But look to Rabbi Yoshua. If a woman went ahead, and literally again, Kishta, Rashi says over here, Ksiba Parshas Zava, Bachad Hashem Shebei Nida Lenida, Shemayim Aviyan Lidei Ziva, V'isha Kiyazov Zov Dama. So again, Rabbi said, let's say she has a situation where she's flowing for 3 days within her 11 days of Zivos, Im Shafsa Me'es Le'es, if it stopped, if it subsided for Me'es Le'es usually means 24-hour period, the Yalda, Hariz Yoledes Bezov. So if it stopped for a 24-hour period and she gave birth during that time, this is called the Yoledes Bezov. So technically speaking, a woman could give birth while she is in a state of zivos. Okay, so that has its own ramifications as well. Dear Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shua says, Laila v'yom kalele Shabbos v'yomo. I would say, how incredible is this? Right? In one Gemara, right, a reference to Purim, a reference to Shabbos. Reference to Purim, reference to Shabbos. Again, Rabbi Yeshua says, Laila yom kalele Shabbos v'yomo. Now, I will say, again, the Purim one you probably could share at the Shabbos day, right? This one I don't know that I would, right? This one probably not going to work well. And he says so the mice again. So Rabbi Yeshua says if she stops bleeding, right? If she stops bleeding, ultimately again, not just for a 24 hour, no, not just for a day, but ultimately again like a Shabbos, namely a night and a day. Sheshafsa minat sar v'lo min adam, and also it's the pain that subsided, right? The labor pains that subsided, not the blood. Bein din ladin. Okay, so I'll say once again, just all examples of cases where the stakes are high in the machlokes because they're dealing ultimately again with a case where if done intentionally, it's a chiyuv kares, unintentionally chiyuv chatas. Next, bein din ledin, bein dine mamras, dine nefashas, dine makas. They have machlokes again on both sides. Again, against dine, right, capital cases, monetary cases, malchus cases. So what are examples where these cases could result in kares? Dine mamras, this is very interesting. What's an example, ultimately, again, a monetary case? They plugged to the Shmuel of Rabbi Avo. Listen to this. Machlokes Shmuel Rabbi Avo. What's the machlokes? Shmuel. Shnayim shedanu dinei and din. Listen to this. Shmuel says, if two people act as a beis din, so their judgment is a valid judgment. However, ela shenikrain beis din chatzuf. They're called the chutzpahdik beis din. Okay. Rabbi Avo Amar ledivrei hakol ein dinei hendin. Rabbi Avo says no. Everyone agrees that what a beis din of two people can't issue halachic rulings, and therefore the halachic rulings are totally invalid. Rabbi say, how does, okay, I hear the machlok, it's interesting. How does this result in a kares case? Rabbi say, watch how Rashi explains this. This is fascinating. So remember again, let's say you have a beis din of two people. Beis din of two people, adjudicated case between Reuven and Shimon. Right? Reuven claims that Shimon owes him money. Beis din of two people ask him, they say, Reuven's right, and they extract money from Shimon. Now what happens? So now Reuven uses that money, and he's mekadesh a woman. Right? The problem is what? According to one opinion, he's mekadesh with money that does not belong to him. So now you could create a potential a married woman situation, which again could result potentially in adultery or a whole variety of different circumstances, which could become a chiyuv kares, right? Or different arise, it could become a chiyuv kares. So again, and that all started from a monetary dispute. So here's an example again. If let's say the second Mamre says, I hold that a beis din could be 2, and the other opinion say a beis din could be 3. So even though again it's it's monetary cases. It's monetary cases which could result in a potential chiyuv kares. Fascinating. Dini nefashas. But looked at the Rabbi v'Rabbanon. What's the din nefashas case? Rabbi and the Rabbanon. The sign your Rabbi Omer v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. Right? At so the Gemara says mammon. In general, when the Torah says a life for a life, it doesn't literally mean a life for a life. Rather, what does it mean? It means monetary compensation. Ata omer mamano eino ela nefesh mamish. You say money, but maybe it means actually a life for a life. Ne'emar nesina lemala, v'ne'emar nesina lemata. Says Gzeir Shava, right? It says nesina above, it says nesina below. Mal halon mammon, afkan mammon. So we'll say, so once again, let's say they have a machlokes about what nefesh tachas nefesh means. So literally, the zakin mamri could be asking to put someone to death. The other chevra could say, no, it means monetary compensation. And once again, this could potentially lead to a chiyuv kares if done intentionally, chiyuv chatas if done unintentionally. Dine makas. What about makas? Rabbi beplukted Rabbi Yishmael Rabbanan. This nan makas begimel. Rabbi Yishmael bechaf gimel. So again, fundamental machlok is how many do you need for a beis din? Ultimately, again, of malchus. So one opinion says a beis din of gimel, 3. Another says a beis din of chaf gimel. So both say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stop over here. We're going to stop over here for today. I know we went a little bit fast. I wanted to be able to get through. But again, I just want to, here's the takeaway. Here's the takeaway. We know we have, right, Mishnah taught us the zakin mamre. So now we know the entire process of zakin mamre. Three-way machlokes, ultimately, again, about what are the cases that make one a zaken mamre? What we were just doing over here is really focusing on the opinion of Rabbi Meir, which, by the way, I don't want to spoil it because it's tomorrow's daf. That's how you pass halacha l'maisa. In order for a zaken to become a zaken mamre, the machlokes has to be about something which, if done intentionally, would carry a chiyuv kares, and if done unintentionally, would carry a chiyuv chatas. Take that to the bank. That's halacha l'maisa. All the Gemara was then just doing was interpreting the pasuk that we started the daf with today, which outlined all the different kinds of cases and showed how each and every one of those cases could potentially be a chiyuv kares / a chiyuv chata. So we'll say, and again, in the midst of all this, we got Purim. In the midst of all this, we got Shabbos. In the midst of all this, we got a hug and a kiss from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I will say again, a Freilich and Purim, we're going to daven Emir Tashem in the main shul. Tremendous shkoyach, tremendous week, and a good Erev Shabbos. Yeah. All right, Chevra on Zoom. A good Shabbos, a Freilich and Purim. Welcome to Mike's Squad. From Modi'in. Okay, Baruch Hashem, Israel Chevra is really presenting today. Or Mike, I don't know if this is your first time on Zoom with us. No, you must have been. All right, second time. All right, good. Chevra, good Erev Shabbos. A Freilich and Purim, everyone.